Welcome to the Police Accountability Board regular meeting. It's being called to order. Well, let me begin with the public advisory. The PIB has resumed in-person meetings and encourages community members to attend in person. Community members attending in person should observe the health and safety protocols for in-person meetings of the Berkeley boards and commissions as outlined by the city of Berkeley. The PIB acknowledges that physical attendance may not be feasible for all community members. To this end, the Office of Director of Police Accountability has been exploring the option of allowing for remote participation at the PIB meetings. Please note that the ODPA and the PIB are in the early stages of implementing this hybrid meeting format. So there is a possibility for technical glitches and errors. Your patience and understanding is greatly appreciated. To access this meeting remotely, join from a PC, Mac, iPad, iPhone, or Android device using this URL listed below. If you do not wish for your name to appear on the screen, use the drop-down menu and click on rename to rename yourself to be anonymous. To request to speak, use the raise hand icon on the screen. To join by phone, dial 1-669-900-6833 and enter the meeting ID 826-5359-6072. If you wish to comment during the public comment portion of the agenda, press *9 and wait to be recognized. At this time, I'd like to read the Berkeley Land Acknowledgement. The city of Berkeley recognizes that the community we live in was built on the territory of the Hushun, the ancestral and unceded land of the Chicheyo speaking Ohlone people, the ancestors and descendants of the sovereign Verona Band of Alameda County. This land was and continues to be of great importance to all the Ohlone tribes and descendants of the Verona Band. As we begin our meeting tonight, we acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of Berkeley, the documented 5,000-year history of a vibrant community at the West Berkeley Shawnee, and the Ohlone people who continue to reside in the East Bay. We recognize that Berkeley's residents have and continue to benefit from the use and occupation of this unceded, stolen land since the city of Berkeley's incorporation in 1878. As stewards of the laws regulating the city of Berkeley, it's not only vital that we recognize the history of this land, but also recognize that the Ohlone people are present members of Berkeley and other East Bay communities today. Which brings us to the call to order and roll call.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start with the roll call. Board Member Calavita.
Here.
Vice Chair Harris.
Here.
Board Member Lethbridge.
Here.
Chair Moore.
Here.
And Board Member Wilson.
Here.
Present, we have quorum.
Excellent. Which brings us to agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda.
I'm going to we approve it. Agenda.
May I have a second?
I'll second.
Excellent. Which will take us to agenda item number 3, seeing or hearing no criticisms or concerns with the agenda. We move that forward to the public comment.
Okay. As always, we'll go ahead and start with members who are physically present before proceeding to members who are attending virtually. With that being said, are any of the members present here today would like to provide public comment? No. Okay. I will now go ahead and move to virtual public comment. Okay, at this time, if there's any members of the public attending virtually, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand. At this time, I currently do not see any hands for public comment.
Seeing or hearing no speakers from the public present, that will take us to agenda item number 4, approval of the minutes.
So moved.
I actually have a
Please,
couple
board
of
member.
things.
Of which,
Yeah, so just a couple of minor things on page 7. Board member Levine was not here. And then on page 11 of the packet, the 4th, guess it's a bullet down. Says board member Leftwich states that she believes the PAB needs more clarity around the distribution of labor with communications. And I think it'd be more accurate to say around communication protocols instead of the distribution of labor with communications.
Okay.
Okay, noted.
With those changes being entered, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes.
Second that,
Perfect. Thank you for agenda item number 5, the ODPA staff report.
Mr. Chair, ladies, members of the board, good evening. We'd like to start off our report with a recap of a recent conference we had the opportunity to attend. We attended the CAPO conference, which is the Canadian Association for Civilian Oversight of Law Enforcement. Excuse me. And we just, report back on that and what we were able to gather from that. Mr. Murillo and I attended, it was in Nova Scotia, in Halifax this year. We were lucky that we were evacuated in areas nearby because of the fires, and we kept getting the alerts, but we didn't have that situation for us. So we were grateful for that. Now we ready for the PowerPoint? And the PowerPoint is also on the for members of the public, and the board is starting on page 14 of the packet. While he gets that together, I'll just give you some background. CAPOL is the Canadian equivalent of our NACO. And for the last few years, they were established a little bit later. And the Canadian model is different in many regards to ours, but the spirit of oversight, I think, is still it's the same in ensuring that we have the best policing that communities can have. And we had the opportunity to partake in their annual conference. Advance the next slide. Next slide. So this is their board chair. They do also have an executive director, as NACO now as well has an executive director, but this is the chair of CAPO, and she herself is also a practitioner of oversight. She's with the Civilian Review and Complaints Commission of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Force. So she had a very impressive background, as you can see, Micheline Leahy. She was in the military, Canadian military, and has served in different capacities in the field of oversight. You can advance the next slide. These are some of the core presenters there. One name you may recognize, is not in this one. See there? Brian Ford, who was our facilitator for he had the opportunity to present on what was his topic? Do you remember his topic, Brian Ford? Community policing. So he brought his experiences from Cambridge and also from the US in general, and informed our colleagues in Canada. But they also had other practitioners too. They had a psychiatrist, a current PhD student, and they also had a family member, a father of a young man who had autism, or was on the autism spectrum, and he was involved in the negative police encounter that they try to highlight, but that wasn't the cause of he unfortunately overdosed. But the reason he was there was to raise more awareness about how police can be more in tune with individuals that are on the autism spectrum, and to be able to provide better services. So a very emotional, I think, but a very necessary conversation we had around it. So this was the lineup for day one, cultural implications. Mr. Murillo, do you want to add anything about your reflections from that particular day? Or
I think one of the things I really appreciated about these presentations was the variety of different perspectives that they brought to talk about it. I feel that oftentimes in some of our presentations, we hear from folks that study it or work in capacity like ourselves, but not necessarily folks that are currently living in it. So we have members of the local Indigenous community giving presentations about their aspects of how they practice oversight and how they even practice policing within their own communities, which I thought was really, really interesting. It talked about the different barriers that folks may have with complaints or even accessing police services, and the ways that they thought could be further promoted. So it was a very powerful experience, in general, again, just because of the variety of different perspectives, not just from community activists, but from law enforcement personnel, within these communities. And we even had a union representation talking about, their perspective and their relationship with both the community, their officers, and practitioners of oversight.
In that report, I haven't had a chance to review it yet, I just became aware of it, but it seems very promising and the systemic racism in policing in Canada, so it's good to hear that other communities are also addressing these societal issues that we're facing. Next slide. Trauma-informed investigative techniques, and this was led by the psychiatrist, and I think this was very informative. I think very deep in the science though. She was talking a lot about the neuroscience and behind trauma. And the takeaway though, one of the things that I appreciated was that you can't do trauma-informed investigations and be trauma-based and not sacrifice your neutrality in doing this work, and I thought it was important. At the end of the day, we're providing a service to community members, and I think she really emphasized that it doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice one for the other, and I thought it was an important point. Any comments you want to add there?
No, just, well, I do, just briefly building off, to me, this was one of the most interesting sessions during, I mean, they're all interesting, but I took a particular keen interest just because it talked about the different ways that whether through our investigative work or even through our policy work, the different ways that we approach certain scenarios, and how, again, making trauma-informed decisions about the different perspectives that we seek when we're reviewing policies, different point of views, and the different considerations that we take to make sure that one, our questioning, questioning our decision is informed of all parties and makes it a communal place that where we're building off of each other, not necessarily working within an adversarial system, which I thought was particularly of interest.
I just had a question about this. When I saw this, I was wondering if it was discussed from the perspective of trauma that's suffered by police officers. Or this, because I think that's something that's important.
Well,
Also
one of the
consider-
things that, again, the reason this was one of my favorite sessions was because we got the different perspectives from it. So we talked about trauma in terms of police officers and like their perspective and their daily work and workloads. And then again, we covered the community perspective of it. And then we briefly touched about it, like even as practitioners of oversight, that we're dealing with all these different emotions and these different perspectives and hearing these different points of views, how that can have an impact on us. So again, one of my favorite sessions and definitely one that I took away a lot from.
This is a discussion that was led by our American colleague, Brian Court. He did a lot of discussion about community policing and oversight. Talked about the notable events that we know here and that have impacted our field and criminal justice system in general. Is there anything else you want to add on that section?
Not to this.
This is the session where they were talking about neurodiversity and the spectrum and autism spectrum. This is where the father had the opportunity to tell his experience with his son. And it seemed though, what I appreciated about that particular anecdote that they shared, that the police department in that community was receptive to learning more about how to better have these interactions. At face value, the child looked like an adult. He was, do you recall his age or?
It was 13.
Yeah, I thought he was 13, but he was like 6 feet tall. He was like very tall, 13-year-old. So he looked like an adult, receptive like one, and it wasn't, please forgive me about backing out the terminology, but it wasn't abundantly obvious that he might be on the autism spectrum. So the officer didn't immediately make that connection as opposed to someone that just wasn't being compliant with him. But through this event that his son experienced, they were able to start the conversation, and now he's, I believe, a national leader in this conversation in this space in Canada, and informing police departments about how to have better interactions.
Yeah, so the last day was really just recapping a lot of the different sessions. One of the key takeaways here was an interesting conversation that all stakeholders within the field of policing and civilian oversight had. So it was a big panel discussion. We had representatives from the local police unions, we had officers, practitioners of oversight, as well as even some of the legal representation that represented officers when there is these incidents of misconduct allegations. So it was an interesting perspective to hear the discussion that was going on between the different stakeholders and the concerns that they had, but also as well as the areas that they felt were working really well. So again, it was interesting, it was worthwhile, and it was just a nice way to end the conference.
And one thing that's not listed there, part of their discussion, they're having discussions about deployment of body worn camera. They don't have it in all the departments yet. In some departments, there's hesitancy. They noted, and this is the second you had the opportunity to attend, and they also had a discussion last year about body worn camera. And they cite a lot of our studies because we're ahead of the field in many regards in the US with that. But they're also taking note of what's not working with body worn camera in the US. So they're being very, I think, careful in how they approach this discussion, conversations about when they're going to release footage, who gets to review footage. So we definitely encourage them. We had the opportunity at the dinner reception to talk with some of the colleagues there, and we suggested some of the studies that we're looking at, and even the conference that's happening in Washington later this month. So it's good to be able to have that exchange about how to do these best practices, effective practices in our field. Also present in the American delegates were the NACO president, Gio Orlando. She was present, and Brian Core and Murillo, myself were there, and they did recognize us at the dinner.
And again, just recapping, KPOL was a very important conference for us to attend. Like one, it allowed us to gain a different perspective as to what other work is being performed in our field. I like to say it gets us out of the United States bubble, and we kind of see what's working, what's not working in other countries and other sectors that are also practicing oversight. It was a good opportunity for our training and education. Again, as I mentioned, one of my favorite sessions. Really informed me in terms of what it means to be trauma informed, and particularly within our field and the different perspectives that we have to consider, or even highlighting some of the aspects that may not be one of my current best practices, but that I can work on. So again, emphasis on the best practices of other jurisdictions. We had a great opportunity just to share different experiences. I believe that is. Yes.
And once we get the materials for that conference, we'll get ahead and forward them to the rest of the board. The next topic there is the we're discussing about the code of ethics. That's also, I believe, is in the packet. Page 27. So for the members of the PRC, may or may not know this, but at some point the PRC adopted the NACO Code of Ethics. This board, to my knowledge, nor the office has yet adopted the Code of Ethics. And I think that they're a very noble code of ethics that we should strive to be able to push ourselves as practitioners in this field. We're interested in the office as being able to adopt this code of ethics and or a similar code of ethics. It would, I think, just for the sake of a unity and being in step, it makes sense for the board and the office to adopt it at the same time. So I don't know how you envision this, but if you want to wait until there's full membership, or if you're ready for a future agenda item to have that discussion, we just wanted to put that on the radar, that the office is interested, definitely for our operations to be able to have a guiding code of ethics like the NACO one.
Well, I reviewed it and I'm ready to make a motion that we adopt it.
Yeah, I would second that.
This just wasn't necessarily on the agenda.
Yeah.
But I love that, and why don't we agendize that
Yeah.
for the next meeting?
Okay. Yep.
So the next item in the staff report, a few weeks ago or a few meetings ago, I came to you regarding a budget request for additional staff members, and you approved the resolution. I submitted it to council. They have received it. The budget committee or subcommittee is reviewing that. Tomorrow, there'll be a presentation of that item at the subcommittee level or committee level, and before it goes to council. But I just want to give you an update about that activity. I plan to report on what the staff report was that I presented to you, the reasons why we believe that would be beneficial for our staff to have that additional budget request approved. You have any questions?
I do. Could you just quickly remind, was it their request for 2 additional positions?
Yes, one was for a communication specialist that would assist with outreach and communication related matters. The other one was for additional investigator, and based on our discussion, there was the idea of having that investigator be cross-trained or have cross duties in policy related work and also investigative work when the workflow allows for it. So but it would be primarily billed as an investigator, but they would have that flexibility.
Are there any other questions?
I guess, so if the budget committee says you can have 1 position, I don't remember whether we prioritized or discussed this, or if you have prioritized in your memo.
Yeah, I gave the alternative options of providing let me see if I have it. Off the top of my head, I think the alternate recommendation was to provide additional funding for as needed projects and or to provide funding for having a robust internship program. I don't know that we prioritize one over the other. If they were to give that response back, I'm willing to have that discussion with the board. I think, yeah, I think I would need to review it a little further in terms of the needs, but so I don't have a specific response at this time. Okay. The next item on the staff report, last night, the council met at a regular meeting. The controlled equipment report was presented or included on the agenda. They put it in their consent agenda. So there wasn't any particular discussion about it. I did make the commentary that the department did take into account the recommendations made to them. They put actually they did kind of a twofer where one recommendation was to provide infographics and also put the percentages. So one of the infographics they added was the percentages of the breakdown of the controlled equipment. The one thing though, I did note that we didn't, for this particular report, we didn't look at each use of or each deployment of the equipment beyond the report itself. So we didn't review anybody on camera footage or do any review of incident report. So based on as how it was reported, it seemed like they were legitimate use of the equipment, but that was done at face value, so I made that point to the council. They did, Councilmember Harrison, clarified, that the legislative intent regarding the audit was for the department to just mention if they did audits, not necessarily that they were required to do audits. So she made that point because that was something that we mentioned in our report. Nothing additional on that. Today, there was a webinar on use of force. Captain Fomby, a former member of BPD, was present there. I don't know if you want to provide any, or anybody's interested in providing any feedback on that presentation.
I thought it was a very useful presentation in general for use of force and the different tactics that are currently used or in the different areas that should be used. I felt it was particularly beneficial to cover how current training often is, I want to say, antiquated to an extent. And it kind of goes back to the idea of academies not necessarily updating some of their training material, but how now there's a current trend, for example, in the ways that they restrain somebody. They particularly cited using Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, which is more of a less aggressive martial art, but that's very, it's very useful in terms of restraining folks in a way that's, this particular term used was more body or more camera friendly, where again, it's not as aggressive, it gets the job done in incidents where additional force is required. So that was just an interesting perspective. A lot of the examples that are being shown were through body worn camera footage from different jurisdictions. So I thought that was particularly informative, and it further encouraged my curiosity to learn more about the different practices that use of force entails and the different scenarios beyond the 1 hour training session. It was acknowledged that it's very difficult to provide an adequate training on use of force through webinars, and there was the idea to encourage folks whenever there was a possibility to try to be in one of these physically present and participate just to get a sense for it. So again, it was a very informative webinar. I would encourage folks to sign in for any future ones.
And all these webinars are ultimately available via recording, so if you missed it live, please let us know. We'll make sure we get you the link for the recorded session. And if you attended, please let us know also, so we give you the credit. Did a board member left, which notified her that she attended. And the last item is the Juneteenth. You want to provide that update?
Yeah, so we'll be providing more information on agenda item later today, but I just want to remind folks that not this weekend, but the following, we'll be present at the Juneteenth Festival on Sunday from 11 to 7 p.m. As y'all noticed, we provide some t-shirts and some materials that we'll be providing out to folks. So we welcome y'all. If you could make yourselves available, it'd be nice to have y'all there participating with us and engaging with the community. And again, we'll be providing more information later today. Yeah.
So we got for now, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Thank you for your reports. Which brings us to agenda item number 6. This is the chair and board member reports. Our report will be very short and succinct. I am very excited about Juneteenth. I am going to ask that if you can be present, that you make yourself available. I feel like it's a very important public facing opportunity for this board. And a way that, you know, to be in the community is to actually do outreach, and we talk about it. Let's be about it. I look forward to all the signups that I know we're going to have. So that's me buttering it up. At the same time, I hope that everyone got a chance to check out the article that was about the board in Berkeley side. And I wanted to let the board know that there'll be another article that will be coming out very soon about in the Californian about our board and our workload and what we need to do to succeed, the support we need.
In the
So
daily
we're-
count, that we.
That's what I said.
Where is it coming?
Where, wait,
What venue?
the California,
Oh,
Open California.
it's hard to hear because they've got,
it is loud over
Yeah.
there. So those are the things I wanted to update the board on. If you have any questions for me, now would be the time. And if not, I'm gonna move this to any other board member who'd like to address us. All right, opening it up. Anybody, would you like to take the floor?
Well, I just like to say that unfortunately I won't be here for Juneteenth. If I was here, I'm gonna be out of town, so. But I'm hoping that everybody else or at least a couple other people can make it with you guys.
Appreciate that, appreciate it. And that being said, I'm going to give the floor to the chief. It's agenda item number 7. Chief's report. Welcome, chief.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
All right, so I do have some comments tonight. I'm going to start off with a couple cases of interest since our last meeting. On June 3rd, a suspect entered a business in the 1700 block of Shattuck and approached a female victim who was alone in the business at the time. The suspect sexually battered the victim and then fled when the victim ran from the store screaming. This suspect's image was captured by surveillance cameras, and on June 4th, one of our alert patrol officers spotted that suspect in the downtown area and was able to detain him. That suspect was positively identified by the victim and was arrested for the assault with intent to commit a sex crime, false imprisonment, and a parole violation. And during the Miranda interview of that suspect, he did admit to a number of elements of those crimes. On May 31st, there was a suspect who stole a catalytic converter in the 2200 block of Virginia. During this theft, the suspect was interrupted by the victim, and the suspect swung a metal tool at the victim's head, narrowly missing him. Suspect then fled in his vehicle, and when an officer spotted him and tried to detain him, the suspect fled, jumped from his car, ran, and was not apprehended that day. When they were impounding the vehicle that the suspect left behind, they did discover 4 catalytic converters in that car. The next day, the registered owner of that car called and said his vehicle had been stolen out of Oakland. Officers were able to look at the picture of the registered owner and realize it was the same individual that they had tried to detain. They convinced him to return back to Berkeley, where he was arrested for the theft, assault with a deadly weapon, evading officers, and filing a false police report. This individual did also have prior arrests for catalytic converter thefts. So moving on to our staffing situation, we're still relatively the same as we were last meeting with 149 sworn officers. We do have 3 police recruits that are graduating on June 22nd from the Sacramento Police Academy. They'll start their FTO training down here with us right after that. We're also on track to send hopefully 4 new hires to the police academy that starts early next month. On the dispatch side, we did bring a new dispatcher on this week. We have quite a few backgrounds that we're working through for dispatchers. We are, however, still sitting at 21 dispatchers with an authorized strength of 36. I did want to share that I attended the personnel board on Monday for 2 items. One item was to update the dispatcher job qualifications so that we ensure that we're not losing qualified candidates due to some very specific language that was in the job spec. So what we want to make sure is that candidates are not self-selecting out of applying, but that instead we're testing through the testing process and evaluation of resume and our entire process. We're screening people out that don't qualify there and not having people self-select out. The second item that went to the personnel board was obtaining approval for the new job classification for the department, and that is of deputy chief. So this is a single class position, and it's going to be an administrative and professional assistant to me. That person will be responsible for policy development, program planning, risk management, training, personnel management. Basically, it's a second in command for the police department and will act in my stead when I'm unavailable. So this is going to be converted from one of our 4 captains positions. We'll convert into the deputy chief, and that is pending council approval. But it's, it speaks to kind of the thing that you've been asking me for quite a bit, which is a liaison. So in my mind, that's one of the roles that this individual could carry, would be the liaison for the board with the department. So again, this still needs to get council approval, and that's going to likely appear on the July 25th council agenda. And while we're on the topic of positions within the department, I did want to thank Director Aguilar for participating as a panelist in our recent process to establish an eligibility list for our captains. We did have Chair Moore scheduled to attend to, but he had a last minute emergency come up that stopped him from participating. But my intent is when and if I get approval for a deputy chief position, to have the same kind of community panel with participation from both the director and a board member in that process as well. And then finally, I wanted to give an update on a couple other items that are going to council in June and July from the police department. One of those is our quarterly update on our implementation progress on fair and impartial policing recommendations. I did send that to Director Aguilar today and asked him to share it with the board, as I know several board members are interested in that update. Also this week, we're finalizing what's a kind of a companion item with the special equipment ordinance. It's the pursuant to Assembly Bill 481, the annual military equipment report, very similar to the special equipment report that you reviewed, but has a couple different categories that are expected to be answered for the state report. As soon as we finalize that, I will also be sharing it with the board for your review. It does not have the same review and reply process that the city ordinance expects with the special equipment. But I would like, if there's any feedback or questions that arise after you review it, I would like to know, and I would be happy to share that with council if I have that. And that item is also due to land at council on July 25th. Let's see. And then the final thing is I did want to check in with the board about the use policy and acquisition report for ALPRs that we provided to you as part of requirement for the surveillance ordinance. So our materials need to go to the clerk's office by June 22nd to be on the July 25th council meeting. And I do want to be able to include any feedback from the PAB, either in an updated version of our policies if needed, or as a companion to our items that go. And also for the board's information, this item will be reviewed by the Public Safety Policy Committee at their June committee meeting, which is scheduled on June 20th due to the Juneteenth holiday on the 19th. And that's all I have. Happy to answer any questions. I know that was a lot of material.
When we're talking about the equipment use policy 481, last year we did that as a subcommittee, correct? And we saw that information, we reviewed it as a subcommittee and got it back to you. Is that the same way you envision doing this time?
Well, both the special equipment ordinance and the military equipment report, the very first year of reporting and kind of generating this process was last year. So I know there was a lot of subcommittee work to kind of develop what you wanted to see in the report. We're happy to participate in a subcommittee process if that's of interest to the board. We're also happy to take feedback on things you'd like to see in the next annual reporting. And for us to incorporate moving forward or do a supplemental report if the PAB wants to see some different information. We run up on some timelines. So basically the state law requires that within a year of the last report going through to council, which was July 26th, we have to provide the next annual report. So that's why we're scheduled to get it on their calendar for July 25th. If there was substantial information that you wanted to see differently that we could pull, once it's agendized, we satisfied the state requirement. We could potentially take a pause and have council continue it to a later meeting and do that work if you wanted to get that in progress. But we have to get it on their calendar by the 25th.
Understood. I think that's something that I would have to talk to the director and the board about to get some kind of consensus. But we want you to make sure that you have what you need to get on the calendar and fulfill those legal obligations. But we definitely want to be part of the process and continue that work.
Yeah, and just to be clear, that document is going to look almost the same as the one you guys just took a look at.
So, I remember we spent months on it. Board Member Leftwich.
Yes, I had a couple of questions. The first, you mentioned the ALRP ordinance, ALPR. Could you remind us what that is? And you said it's gonna come to us before it goes to public safety and the council. Could you just repeat what you
Yeah.
said?
So, and I won't get the dates exactly right, so I don't have it in front of me, but Councilmember Taplin submitted an item to budget and was approved by council for implementation of ALPRs for fixed locations. It was required that before we implemented that recommendation that we get pursuant to the surveillance ordinance, use policies and an acquisition report. So we engaged in that. We finally had staff time and were able to engage in that work. Those materials were delivered to the board. I think it would be a month ago because you guys are the board is expected to have 30 days. And so I think it was May 20th that it went to the board for review. The ordinance expects that you will have something back by 30 days, but really you have a little bit longer because we won't land on the calendar until July 25th. So the ordinance sets up these.
We haven't seen it.
I'm just saying that doesn't sound familiar at all to me.
I'm happy to resend the email. Yeah. So we lined it up so you'd have the 30 days, but like I said, you'll still have some time because of the way the calendaring works for council. But I will, as soon as I get off this call, find that email again and resend it. It will go to the Public Safety Policy Committee for a first look at it, June 20th. And then we're looking at July 25th for it to hit council. So there's still some time, but that's just the way the timing of the surveillance ordinance works.
Okay, thanks. And the second thing is, I don't know if you heard earlier, some of us attended a NACOL webinar today about use of force, and Captain Fomby, with the Berkeley PD, was the instructor or the person doing the webinar. And one of the things that he was stressing was the need for more training, especially around de-escalation. And I know that de-escalation is addressed in the use of force policy, but I'm wondering if there's separate training provided just on de-escalation, or if it's a part of the broader training.
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a piece of many different trainings you'll see. We always incorporate de-escalation scenarios in all of our scenario-based training. Our range training talks about de-escalation. When we do range training, we have scenarios or parts of that that talk about de-escalation. A lot of the other courses that we attend have de-escalation components. One of the challenges that we do see out there is that there's a lot of subject matter that we love to see additional courses in. You know, some of the implicit bias work. You know, we send officers to a single class, and we're always looking for a refresher and new instructors in that, and it can be a challenge to find fresh and new courses. And we stay really focused. One of the great things that's happened is the post academy training has expanded in those areas and added additional hours around those. So we're always looking for more training around those topics. And I would say too that our daily bulletin trainings, a lot of our daily bulletin trainings that come with the Lexipol stuff have de-escalation components in there also.
And just lastly, the board had asked before about the idea of whether we could ever observe some sort of training. And I know the feedback we got was that there was some hesitance, and that might make the participants uneasy to think that we were watching or judging them. And then there was some talk about us personally doing a use of force training, which I personally didn't think was what we were looking for. At least I wouldn't find that helpful for me or relevant. And I'm just wondering if there are any types of training that you thought it would be okay for us to observe, because I think it would be really helpful for us to see some of the trainings.
Yeah, I think there are trainings where that's appropriate. And I think a lot of times we want officers to really take to be able to open up in their trainings and really dig into the things they might be feeling and their experiences. And, you know, and I think sometimes we're challenged with trust relationships between our bodies. And I think the more we kind of explore ways to ease into that, the better it will be. I will say that you bring up the training component, and Director Aguilar and I have been talking, and I did learn that Livermore PD acquired a simulator training system that does some of that use of force scenario training, which includes de-escalation components. They have invited and done that training with accountability board type members, community members, their city council members. They have agreed to allow us to use that facility to run a training for you all, for our council, if you were interested in arranging that. We just need a little bit of a heads up. Like I said, Director Aguilar and I started talking about that. I just had a conversation with the Livermore chief a couple of weeks ago, and he said he would absolutely help support it. The idea being that we would bring some of our departmental trainers in to have a conversation with the board, whoever attended that, to talk a little bit about how we train and what our expectations are. And then to have those who were interested go through that training. If you were interested, we could talk about maybe seeing if some of, a couple of our officers were interested in willing to go through that training with you guys. It's certainly a space we would be willing to talk through. I think that could be beneficial in a lot of different ways.
Thank you.
Chair,
Yes, please, go ahead.
thank you, Chief, for your report. I'm concerned about this ALPR, this automated license plate readers use policy, because, to be most effective, it would be good for us to be able to review this and have feedback for the Public Safety Committee, which is coming up on the 20th, you say. And I was one of the people who early on was on the subcommittee about ALPRs, and there was quite a bit of discussion about it, whether there was mission creep going on because they were originally acquired, authorized for parking enforcement. And so I, for one, would be very interested in being able to have feedback, being able to provide feedback in time for that Public Safety Committee. But I'm concerned that we haven't seen it yet, and
Yeah, and I completely understand in the crush of all the emails that we get, sometimes things get lost. I did send it over to the director on May 11th. I just resent it now to him. Hopefully he can get that to you tonight. And like I said, you're right, it's coming up close on the Public Safety Policy Committee meeting. But hopefully with it not going to council until the 25th, that'll give you guys a little bit of extra time to take a look at it. And to be clear, this is a policy that still has to go through Public Safety Policy Committee. It's going to want and need feedback from the PAB, obviously, and council is ultimately going to have to weigh in on exactly what they want to see in the parameters of it. You're absolutely right. We are just working at the direction of council to develop these items. We were specifically directed to do that, and that's what we have done. So we are open to whatever guidance and feedback that comes along the way with that, and can hopefully land on a policy that supports all the things that we need to support in our community, which very much includes privacy and how long things appropriately should be retained for, and what, when we retain things, what we look at absolutely is going to be part of the conversation, and we're here for it.
Okay, so the other thing is just my curiosity. You mentioned at the beginning of your report, an incident that was captured on the surveillance camera.
That's someone's private camera.
Oh, I was
Yeah.
curious to find out which surveillance camera that was. So
Yeah,
that was a private.
that was correct.
Thank you.
Vice Chair?
Yeah, I just have a question sort of off different subject. So I'm actually working on the body worn camera committee, and we were discussing the audits that you've implemented for the department. And I wanted to find out if that's been added to either the body worn camera policy or the early warning system, or was it sent out by memorandum, and what that process looks like. So is there any data on that? Because I couldn't find anything.
Yeah, so the audit process is discussed in the early intervention system policy. And so that's where it lays out what's going to be reviewed in the process for reviewing. It also lays out some of the other review processes that happen. Like I hold a quarterly board with my captains. We review I review all 148, so resisting arrest cases that happen in our department, and all use of forces on an officer. So PC 69 cases that happen, I review all of those. The audits happen. So all the things that we do as part of our early intervention are all laid out in that early intervention policy. And so I'd be happy to send over a copy of it if that's easier for you to grab and take a look at.
Yeah, that would be great because we're going to be meeting tomorrow. And I also wanted to say kudos to your officers for the swift work in apprehending that suspect. That was really good.
Yeah, thank you.
Director.
Mr. Chair, Chief, I do want to acknowledge I just received it and I'm not sure what happened. I do see that you sent it in May 11th, so I want to acknowledge that was on me, that wasn't on you. So I'll forward it to the board right now.
You know, I understand we get a lot of things, and my apologies for not checking back in again, before this.
All right. Is there any other questions or anything we'd like to ask the chief at this time? And let me say thank you very much, Chief. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good-
you.
You're welcome. Good night.
I did want to follow up on that discussion about the policy, because I don't know how you handled this in the past, but
Which policy?
the
The old.
ALPR.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so just throwing out there, have you considered in a situation like this, like scheduling a special set board meeting just to review the policy prior to this meeting on the 20th? Or having our director submit written comment to the committee indicating that because of this glitch in timing, we weren't able to make a comment, but we do intend to do so prior to it going to council. And so I'm throwing out there, you know.
I think those are great ideas, and I would love to discuss that in the potential subcommittees that we're about to create. And maybe this is something that we take on immediately.
Well, I was actually thinking we should have a special meeting.
Yeah, I mean, what
We don't have
you're right,
time.
We do schedule special
Yeah.
meetings when there's something that we don't have time.
So and
But we
do we
would
have a
have-
10-day notice requirement for a meeting?
No, so for a special meeting, we're actually on 24-hour notice.
Oh, okay.
The only thing on our end logistically is because it is a quorum full board and some of the COVID restrictions have been, some of the COVID exemptions have been pulled back. It's just a matter of pinning down a physical location. Just because we can't have less than quorum meet virtually. And we're limited as to how many times members can participate virtually as well. So it's a matter of just finding a specific time where we could all meet and getting the location pinned down.
Director, we will have a regular meeting before their July 25th meeting, correct?
I believe.
Oh, yeah.
it's- Yeah.
Yeah, I was
Oh,
thinking
yeah.
about the 20th.
Yeah, I
I mean,
agree.
I don't know if there's a conversation we want to have now, but
Yeah.
to be particularly effective, it's better, the Public Safety Committee is really an important place
Mhm.
to have our input. And that's June 20th, so I don't know.
All right, well, why don't we take care of this as we get down the agenda, and this will be something we discuss while we talk about the committee. If there's a call for a special meeting, we can discuss that. I just don't know if that's our end all be all at this time. I'm just here to discuss. So let's go to agenda item number 8, subcommittee reports. Vice Chair Harris, we can
Well, I don't have very much to report for the Folly Born camera. We're actually meeting tomorrow. So I don't have anything new to report yet. We're discussing some changes that we'd like to see made with the policy, but we haven't officially submitted anything yet.
which will take us to conflict of interest subcommittee, Chair Luckwich.
Yeah, so Regina and I met, now that we're limited to 2 members of a subcommittee. Board member Wilson was going to join us, but that would have been too many. I also had a meeting with City Attorney Freema Brown, which was very productive. And even though she didn't make any promises, she was receptive to the idea that outside counsel could be appropriate for the PAB under circumstances indicating that a conflict of interest arises. So I was encouraged by our meeting.
Awesome, thank you. And just to be off topic just for a second, but this is relevant. I see that there's nobody from the city attorney office present at this time. Do we
Wondering
hear-
about that.
We do, they're currently attending virtually, they're just not represented.
Oh, good.
And who do we have?
We have, DCA Hylas.
DCA Harris.
I'm sorry, who?
Who?
DCA Harris.
Stephen.
The new.
Yeah, that was, he came to the meeting, 2 meetings ago.
Yes.
I
So
didn't need
we
him.
do have a city attorney's office staff here.
Excellent. Good to know and welcome. DCA Harris. And that would take, Sherlock, which do you have anything else you'd like to report on conflict of interest at this time? Okay, that takes us to the policies and practices related to the downtown task force and bike unit. There is no chair at this time, and I'd like to give the floor to board member Calvina.
So this committee now, board member Owens, of course, had been chairing it, and she has since resigned from the board. So now it is Chair Moore and me. And we met last Friday, and we will meet again a week from today. And there are a couple of things I wanted to say about our subcommittee. I want to really underscore that this is a policy review subcommittee, because it is often said in the press and at meetings that there is a PAB investigation going on, paralleling the external investigation. And I just want to make sure that the public understands that we, the PAB, is doing a policy review, looking at policies that potentially need updating, tightening, modifying in the context of the downtown task force alleged incidents. Whether or not there are findings that that suggest wrongdoing, that those incidents have sort of alerted us to the possibility that there are a few policies that we need to review and possibly modify. And so when we're finished doing that, we will bring our suggestions for modifications to the full board at a public meeting. And I'm glad somebody from the city attorney's office is here, because I did want to inquire. We are very soon going to be seeing the 240-day deadline, which I believe is July 9th. And within a few weeks, maybe even less, there will be a report from the external investigator presenting their findings. And so the question I have to DCA Alice is where that report will go, and whether the PAB will receive a copy of that report, and or whether there will be a public facing version of the report.
Hi, everybody. I am here as was mentioned earlier. I believe the PAB will receive a copy of it. If you could put your question in writing and send it to us, I will confer with our team and we'll get an answer that's more.
Okay. I just know that there's a lot of public interest, on this, and, it would be great if it were possible to have a public version available.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Board Member Kelly. Director, can we have a formal request for that answer to that question, please?
And this report is on what exactly?
So back in early November or October, late October, there was an allegation from a former member of the police department.
I know about that, but what is
Okay,
this?
so the report, so an external investigator, a law firm was hired to do an investigation of that. As a sort of a proxy for the Internal Affairs Bureau of the Police Department. They opted to take it outside of the department. And so, any investigation of a complaint has to be finalized with possible recommendations for discipline within 240 days of when it first came to the attention of the city. And that 240 days will be July 9th or something like that, the 8th or the 9th. And so that report from the external investigator has to be produced at least by then. So that was the report, was the findings, basically.
Okay.
Is there anybody else?
No, just confirming though that we will make a formal
Oh, yes,
request
that's
to follow.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, very much appreciated. That's all the reports right now from our subcommittees, which will take us to agenda item number 9. This is new business. Discussion of the PAB's participation at Juneteenth Festival on Sunday, June 18, 2023, from 11 a.m. to 7 p.m. I'm gonna hand this over to you guys, staff. I want you guys to feel my enthusiasm there.
Yeah, so as we mentioned earlier during our staff report, the Juneteenth Festival is going to take place on Sunday, June 18th. The festival hours are from 11 to 7 p.m. But of course, setup starts much earlier than that. So we just wanted to give an overview about what it is that we're doing and just kind of get a sense to start getting some volunteers, hopefully. Well, I'm sure that we'll have some volunteers. But again, so we primarily, the director and I would need some help in setting up. For those that can't stay in the afternoon, it'd just be a matter of putting up our tents, making sure that our promotional materials are on the table and that we have all the information set up. Our office is intending to provide brochures and flyers, as well as the nice little notepads that you were all provided with in your senior location. The information that we're providing is just general information, mostly about what our office does, who the board is, who the ODPA is, just to really start informing the community members of like the sense of the work, the board's work with complaints, policy reviews, commendations, and sort of direct folks to those resources. So as you notice, the t-shirts that we provided you has a QR code at the back. If you scan it, it actually leads to our main page where we have all of our agendas and all of our upcoming meetings. So again, it's really just more of an informational session throughout the day.
Excuse me, do we have those brochures? I don't think I've ever seen any.
No, those are still in the process, but
Oh, okay.
they'll come out to you. It's channeling my artistic energies to get those for any feedback. But again, we're considering 2-hour block sessions, just considering how many members there are. But we understand that, you know, oftentimes there are other obligations that you may have.
Father's Day.
Right.
I was gonna say.
Father's Day. Very important. So, you know, we just want to get some feedback, like get a general sense of how many of y'all we could depend on, just for filling in those gaps. We put in a sign-in sheet. Again, it blocks off the 2 hours, but we'll circle back with everyone just to get any specific times once you'll have time to really check your calendar. Director, anything
I
else?
would add, even if you don't go to the Juneteenth on the 18th, they have a good lineup week of events. So I would encourage anybody who has an opportunity from the 11th to the 18th. And yesterday, the city council, they passed a resolution to recognize Juneteenth, Juneteenth and Juneteenth week. So having your presence out in the community, I think is important. If you can't make it on the eighteenth, we will understand it, right? Have different responsibilities, but making an announcement at any one of these events, I think would be helpful, just showing up and having community members see it.
Do you have a list of those events?
Yeah, they're listed on page 31, through 33. That's the lineup that they have. We won't be tabling that. The other event will just be focused on the
Mhm.
18th. So just want to clarify to make that clarification.
And do we have some kind of a,
The 10th?
yeah,
Yeah. It's, did we get it today or?
Yeah, we actually got all our
oh,
motion
good,
materials
because in the
today.
past we had to like.
Okay.
We,
well, we had
same
a
logo
table
on our
for
shirts actually is what our
cards, a
tent.
board for sanity.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So, yeah, we're prepared.
No.
Yeah.
So I just want to say, I'm gonna pledge 4 hours that day.
Oh,
And I'm gonna say I'm out of town for my son's college graduation.
No, congratulations. And, I could do 11 o'clock. Are you asking for volunteers now?
We can connect back with board members through another email, just so that we have it all in
Okay.
a centralized location. It might
Yeah,
be easier for
good.
everyone.
I
But
could do early.
okay, perfect. Okay,
And you
so,
don't have to be stuck on a particular hours, we come at 11:30, if that works best, so let us know. We just want to also avoid having a quorum and voting for the Brown Act. So you might as well vote.
mm.
Okay, so I'm gonna move on from that subject. To discussion and action on the PAB's current subcommittee list. The appointment of new member as needed or members, that's true. And the consideration and action of the RDPA's recommendations as to each subcommittee.
okay.
I'm excited.
Okay. So this slide presentation is really just the document that I put on page 35. So the way that I envisioned this is that we could just go through every subcommittee, just kind of get a quick status on it. What I did and what the director and I worked on is making sure that we provided a recommendation and also as well as the next best alternative. Some of these will, particularly with the surveillance technology, will be connected in terms of the recommendation. Just because either one, there isn't enough members, they need to be renewed, or the task that it was created for has been completed. So with that said, is there any questions before I start? I'll just start going one by one and we'll see how it goes. So it'll be quite a bit of motions, because we'll need one for most of the subcommittees. If, again, the board decides to take action, but we'll get that going.
And the reason we're doing this is because the Berkeley Charter, why are we doing this?
So the
Commissioner's manual requires.
yeah, so for ad hoc subcommittees, they're only active for a year unless the board renews them. There's a few of them that were still on our list, but the term had expired. They hadn't done any work, but it was important to just confirm with the board that we're either no longer interested or that the task was completed. And when I say no longer interested is more of like, it's really more, of we don't have the capacity now, but we definitely want to continue it. We could always reinstate any subcommittee to get going. So with that being said, the very first one is the regulations one. We just renewed, or it's not just, it seems like just yesterday, that was 2022. It was last renewed June 2022, so it's actually coming up. I know those are still in process and we're still pending a few items. So our recommendation was really just to not necessarily reinstate, but to extend it for another year.
We extended.
Well, hold on. What is the status of the regulations?
They're sitting in the, where are they? They're
City
in-
attorney.
Oh, they're being met and conferred. over.
Yeah, they're in the next stage, the board has finished their
6 months.
draft and now it's in the meeting confer process, so.
Okay.
That reminds me, I meant to say something about my meeting with the city attorney. I told her that I think there's confusion, at least I'm confused about the exact process of meet and confer and how we may be involved, and if there are changes, it comes back to us. And she said that she would be happy to call a closed session on that topic for us to be advised about that. So maybe if you could follow up with her, or someone could follow up with her, because I think that would be very helpful, that we understand what the next steps are.
Okay, so my question is, why is this a subcommittee? Our group.
We
is-
drafted the regulations.
A
Yeah,
subcommittee
but if I
draft.
can just finish.
Sure.
The board is very small and we have really way too many subcommittees for the size of our board, even with staff's recommendations. So my
Uh-huh.
question is, why can't the full board consider the regulations when they come back? Why does it need to be a
Yeah, that's a
subcommittee?
good point. That's a good point.
I think it's a good point. It's a smaller subcommittee, but at this point, it's also a matter of efficiency. If we did the full board, we'd have to collect, we had all have to be physically present. We'd have to, essentially do the reservations, we'd have to do the 3-hour noticing requirements. The flexibility that one of the aspects that carried over from subcommittees is that the subcommittee itself can meet remotely over Zoom. So it could address some of anything that comes up through the regulations more efficiently. It still has to come back to the full board for any action to be taken on it. But again, at this stage, it's really more of a matter of efficiency.
Okay, but we meet every 2 weeks, right?
Mhm.
Already. So I guess that for some of these, I would just have us think about like, do we need to be able to call like an ad hoc, very quick meeting? Or at this point, if really we're just waiting for something to come back from union review, would it be sufficient to put it on a regularly scheduled PAB agenda versus having a subcommittee look at it? I'm gonna have that question a lot simply because, again, for this many
We're so
people,
little.
we have too many.
Yeah.
I hear you.
I mean, before we had.
The trade, I'm sorry, I was just saying the trade-off would be these meetings will extend. If we're okay with that,
Yeah,
yeah, I'm okay with it.
and before we had more members, but now, like you said, it's like, it probably would be better, but the trade-off would be that the meetings would be extremely long because it takes a lot of time to review and go through those policies. So in addition to our regular work, we'd have to do that work too. So, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but that was something that we need to agree on and know that, instead of getting out and being done with our meetings at 8:30, 9 o'clock, we might be here till 11. So.
And there's a certain amount of process involved. If we
Yeah.
disband the subcommittee and we want to resume it, then there has to be a
Another
motion and the
motion.
chair has to assign members. So I guess I don't see a downside because basically subcommittee's on hiatus, so it's
Oh, yeah.
not like,
Okay.
Mhm. But I do like that idea because it probably would streamline a lot right now based on the numbers that we have.
Yeah, because we are a small group
Yeah.
and whatever the subcommittee decides has to come to the.
To the
full
small group. To the small
Yeah.
group, so,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there is a motion to extend it. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
we don't need to vote on, do we need to vote on all of these things? Can we just vote it by consensus? Right? Do we don't need a roll call vote on all this.
Yeah, we could, as long as does anybody have any
Not saying
objections?
I'm hearing any objections. I say this moves forward. There you go.
Okay. So this next one. I know scheduling has been a bit tough for the fair and impartial subcommittee. This one is still active and it's good until September. The only thing, and as I've noted, because of the quorum issue, somebody has to step down. And again, our current board members, Chair Moore, Board Member Dalita, and Board Member Harris.
I'll take one for the team, man.
So,
So on this one, I don't know if there's another place on the agenda, I was emailing back and forth with you.
I don't know. bro.
Is there another place on the agenda with the fair and impartials coming up, or is it just here?
it's just here.
Okay, because when I was looking at what the council referred to the PAB with respect to the fair and impartial subcommittee, it's quite an expansive charge and seems very important. Then I also saw that the city manager is supposed to be providing a quarterly update. And it does not look like they've been happening every quarter, or at least they're not coming to us. It also sounds like you have to find them. They're not actually being sent to us.
The chief does the quarterly reports.
Well, in the council referral, it's talking about a city manager providing a quarterly report. And that is, so, I don't know if there's other quarterly reports than the ones that you sent me, but I guess my main point here is this is one where I feel pretty strongly at this point, like I wouldn't like to see this be assigned to a subcommittee, because I think it should fall squarely within what we should be talking about as a group. The oversight of those recommendations, sort of a massive effort with the police department, that I feel we should be engaged in. And I also think it would be helpful to have the discussions in public. So that's my view on this one.
Well, that subcommittee has public members and it is a public meeting. So most of these subcommittees are open to the public and have public members. So
the fair and impartial policing implementation is not just a subcommittee of the PAB,
PAB, yeah.
but it also has other members on it that aren't PAB
It
members.
has, well, in the past, we had 3 board members and 2 public members.
Oh, I see, and
George
BGE members.
Lippman
Okay,
and Elliot Halpern, who's unfortunately deceased now. But we have to reduce the numbers to 2 board members and 1 public member, because you have to have more board members than public members. And anyway, so there's 2.
and they're
So-
public,
They're
this
public.
webcast.
They're on Zoom.
Okay, and so all of these are the regulations one as well?
Yes, the
Okay.
only one that's not is the downtown task force, because that potentially discusses confidential information.
We haven't, also the body worn camera and the conflict of interest have not been public.
I'll tell you, so the Brown Act doesn't apply to these ad hoc subcommittees. And so they are usually agendized, publicized, and so forth. And the very impartial policing one has always been open to the public, and it has public members on it. So I understand what you're saying, but it is complex and it would, the more complex the issue, the more unwieldy it becomes at a full board meeting. But I'm open to considering that. Or, you know, an alternative would be to retain the subcommittee and then just have fuller and better and more frequent reports from
Yeah.
the subcommittee to the full board and get input from the board.
I think that would be helpful, because I don't feel like I have a good understanding of what's going on.
All right, so let's get back on here. Where are we at with fair and impartial? Are we comfortable keeping the subcommittee? This is something we want to discuss with the board. Do I have any motions on the floor?
More?
Yeah.
We're just gonna,
Board Member Wilson.
we were just discussing board member
Would
Wilson.
you like to join that subcommittee with me?
Sure.
Because board member Harris has just said that he would be very happy to trade places with you.
Okay.
Chair Moore has already gotten off of it. You and I, we can't have more than 2.
Two,
Okay.
yeah.
Good idea.
Well, welcome to
Thank you.
fair and impartial, please.
All right.
And
Appreciate it.
George Lippman is the public member, and we're, would you try to get us moving? Thank you. Scheduled, yeah.
All right. So that is, do we need to vote on that? So yes.
So we can still do just by your own consent. I just want to make sure that everyone's okay with it before we go. And then could I just get the motion in the second?
Can I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Second,
Okay,
Which takes us to the mental health response subcommittee.
So you know,
Vice
this,
Chair Harris. I know-
yeah, so this committee, we formed a committee, but we have never met or had an opportunity to even, to do anything with this committee, so. It would be my recommendation right now that we just sort of put this one on hold
Okay.
until that time that we have more board members and.
Should we dissolve it
Should dissolve it now and then.
versus
Or
putting
should we
it?
dissolve it and then just, we can, yeah, so, okay, that's fine,
okay, so is that a motion?
yeah.
And I'll second that.
All right.
was there, I'm sorry, but was there, supposed to be an interface with the mental health commission on that?
So we were gonna try to do some interfacing with them, but we just never met and.
We didn't have time.
We didn't have time to do anything, so.
Which takes us to fixed surveillance camera policy subcommittee. And we know that the board member. Nina,
Oh, I got
So for this particular subcommittee, as well as the unmanned aerial system subcommittee, these are the ones that we get where I am, we're recommending that they sort of get combined because they fall under the umbrella of surveillance technology, particularly with the ALPR review already coming. So we thought as the office that it would make sense to combine these and combine the members. Just so that, again, there's a historical knowledge being preserved, and the work can be continued while reducing. Instead of having 3 subcommittees for similar technology and in the sense of surveillance technology, there's one, so we could expedite the review and bring it to the full board. And that would take care of 3.
So it would be the fixed camera, which is already done.
Mhm.
And what are the other two?
So.
ALPR?
Yeah, so, I just tailored this in from the earlier conversation with ALPRs because they are surveillance technologies. But originally it was in terms of the unmanned, aerial system or the drones and the fixed camera surveillance systems. The reason we didn't recommend that they be dissolved is because they're still technically, being discussed by council, and we're just unsure if there'll be further discussion that might be
Yeah,
directed to us. We just want to make sure we have that subcommittee ready.
yeah.
And then again, ALPRs, because it does fall under the realm of surveillance technology and under the Berkeley Municipal Code of the 299. To me and our office, it makes sense to combine those while we get those policies going.
I would just say with the ALPR, I think there's more urgency. I don't think it should be under the purview of a subcommittee, just because I don't think we have
The time.
time.
Yeah.
So I think we should have a special meeting
Yeah.
just to
I do
focus
too.
on that.
Yeah.
The subcommittee can be combined. And we can have a special meeting of the full board. I mean, one doesn't negate the other.
Yeah.
Right, just not in lieu. I don't think we should do it in
No,
lieu
I
of a
agree.
special meeting.
Right.
My only concern is that these are among the meatiest things that we have to discuss. I mean, the fixed camera issue and the ALPRs, they took a lot of time and trying to figure out what everything meant and trying to come up. And my concern is that's a lot of work if they're combined for one side.
I think the consideration here is that for the drones and fixed camera, again, we're towards the end of it. Where it's really, we're waiting for council and their analysis and their ultimate decision. But again, just bringing back to the point, one other alternative, because as mentioned by Board Member Wilson, we are such a small board. It could be discussed without a subcommittee. Again, we go back to the question of efficiency and whether we do it as a special meeting when that came up versus a subcommittee. So there are a few options with these particular subcommittees.
But for now, we need a motion for combining the various surveillance technologies into one subcommittee.
If the board decides to, yes.
I'm gonna make that motion.
I'll second it.
Are there any objections?
not seeing or hearing any.
Okay.
So what does that mean for the membership? Will we just combine
Yes.
Board member Calavita and board chair Moore. Do you need to assign a chair at this moment or?
We could do that in subcommittee.
Mhm. The report was for the next one, the controlled equipment use and recording. The report was presented to and was on the consent item for council yesterday. The next review wouldn't come until March, if I remember correctly, of next year. So one of the options is the board to dissolve the subcommittee, and just reinstate it next year when that time comes again. Or depending on the membership, it could be
Okay.
a meeting.
I move we dissolve.
I second.
All right.
And then for the chief of police hiring process, this one was established for the board's participation with the chief of police hiring process. The city has a new chief, Chief Lewis.
I move we dissolve.
Second.
Not seeing or hearing objections, we can move on. Drone use policy has been merged.
Yes, so we did skip through the drone because we've already taken care of that. Yeah, so for this one, it's an active subcommittee, downtown task force investigation. We don't really have any action items for that. We just want to list it to make sure that it's on the radar. Then body worn cameras, one of our more recent subcommittees, so there's no action there as well. And then the conflict of interest subcommittees, the same situation. And then the last one that does have an action item is regarding the subcommittee that was established for review of the charter. We established a subcommittee, but there's no members on it. So again, because the subcommittees are being created, we recommended that members be appointed. But again, the other option would be to dissolve it and pick it up at another time. So we just want to get the board's input on that.
My recommendation would be that we dissolve it. I think we've got a lot on our plate, and although I think that's important, there's no urgency to it. That would be my suggestion.
What was contemplated that it would do? I think is this related in part to the conflict of interest?
It is.
Really lack of clarity around what.
It's broader than that because the charter amendment is very poorly drafted. It's got a lot of ambiguities, and working through the regs and just our meetings, we recognize that there are some things that need to be, some issues that need to be addressed, but they would have to go back to another ballot measure. So it's not an easy fix. And so the idea was for us as a group to identify what things we thought needed to be addressed, what issues needed to be addressed. Which I think still is a good long time goal, but I just don't think we have the
With the
capacity.
human resources we have right now, I agree.
Yeah.
But I'd love for someone to make a motion.
Unless
Yeah,
anybody else
motion
has.
that we
other-
dissolve it for now.
Second that.
All right. I'm not seeing or hearing any objections. It's also on that.
And that was the
That's
end
it.
of the subcommittees.
Excellent.
So what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and update the active subcommittee list and include it next agenda. And we distribute that around so that everybody has it.
Thank you, office. I do appreciate your work there. And thank you, board. It's, you know, we boot us and get us ready for the work ahead.
Still, before we adjourn to, or to have public comment and closed session, I still think we need to, I would still move that we have a special meeting to address the ALPRs.
I agree too.
Mhm.
And if I may, Mr. Chair, from my side, and I take full ownership of it, I don't know how I missed that email, but tomorrow I plan to send an email to the city manager to see if she'd be willing to potentially push back that item on the agenda, which would mean it would come after the recess in September 12th at that meeting. I'm not sure she's going to be willing, but I want to make that effort. I recognize it was totally on me looking at the transcript.
Could we go in the interim, could there be some feelers put out? I guess it would have to be next week, a special meeting, right? About everyone's availability, just so in case we have to have it, that we're kind of ready to go.
Pushing back the council treatment of it until after the recess doesn't solve the problem of the public safety committee on June 20th.
Oh, that's true.
We were hoping to have
Something.
something for
Oh,
that.
I thought that's what you meant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, I
I mean,
thought you were
obviously
asking that
would-
both of those things be
Yeah,
pushed
it would
back.
just be
Well,
council.
yeah, and
Yeah.
collectively that this item not be addressed until the board can have more time to review it.
By public
That'll be
safety.
my- Right,
But including the public safety committee.
right, because it's introduced by members of the city or city managers under her, so it would be the police department at this point. But it within their purview to be able to ask for them to push it down for a different meeting.
So the director, let's stay in contact with that and I'll reach out to everyone, the director in the office will reach out. And we'll see if we can, one, a lot of time for this, if that's needed, if we got the pushback or, pushback on the calendar. And we'll have more time to work the ALPR situation.
So our next, I'm sorry, I don't have my calendar. When is our next meeting? Scheduled meeting,
2 weeks from today.
2 weeks from today.
which is what they,
21st.
21st. Okay, so if we're gonna have anything to the
It'd be a special,
committee, it has to be a special. All right.
if they do not push it back. Okay, so I will get back to everybody as soon as we can. Which will bring us now to agenda item number 10, public comment.
Can I, actually, I'm sorry, I don't know if this is the right time, but I would like to make a request for on the next regular meeting. To have this charter, lack of clarity in the charter issues on the agenda, just so you all or staff can update me and as we're looking at the charter on some of the issues that have come up, I think that would be helpful going forward, even if we're not gonna have a subcommittee, I just like to spend a little time being educated on that.
I super support that.
Okay.
So is there,
Yeah. So again, as we did earlier today, I will first start with members of the public that are physically present before moving to those attendees that are tuning in virtually. With that being said, are there any members of the public physically present that would like to provide public comment?
Yeah, I'd like to say how interested I am in the report that will be coming in July. And to see how Police Accountability Board here is going to be focusing on policy things that could be brought up by that. I'm also just interested in that, as I was involved with some things going on at Santa Rita Jail, all the deaths there. And I was wondering about the conditions here in the Berkeley jail. Who oversees that? Does the Police Accountability Board see that? What the physical conditions are? I heard stories of there not being running water for the people in prison to drink and things like that. So I just wondered, yeah, is that part of something that this board would do?
We don't usually respond to public comment, but is it okay if I just make one comment
Please, go
in
ahead.
response to that?
Open-ended question.
We do not oversee the jail. And I don't know if Lieutenant Reese wants to say anything about this, but I think it would be perhaps useful for us to get more information about jail conditions, but I'm very aware of Santa Rita issues. I'm on the Alameda County Mental Health Advisory Board and Criminal Justice Committee. And I think there've been 5 deaths so far just this
Yes,
year.
yes.
Wow.
But I haven't heard about issues in the Berkeley jail, but I don't know if there's anything you want to.
The state of California, the city of Berkeley, and the fire department all separately inspect the jail annually. So there are 3 independent inspections of the jail.
And the city of Berkeley, you said the city of Berkeley.
Yeah, the city inspects,
Who does that?
put me on the spot, but they inspect the food that's served to everybody. They inspect the conditions. The fire department also inspects everything for safety, the fire alarms and all that there. And then the state of California I can't think of the name of the body, but they come in and do an
Inspector
extensive
General.
yearly search. What's that?
The Inspector General?
No, it's part of the same group that does prison inspections statewide.
And I didn't mean
Board
to,
of Community Corrections.
I was just wondering, the city, the city, is it the city manager's office who does it?
It's the health department.
Oh, the health department.
Yeah, BSCC is the acronym. State body inspects it.
and I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I just think it might be useful information, because I don't know how many individuals are held in the jail. I mean, just general information about the jail, I think would be interesting.
Sounds
for
like a
us
training.
To hear
Sounds
about.
like
a
a good
training
Yeah,
opportunity, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
That being said, thank you, Board Member Leftwich. Can we go to see if there's anyone virtual who'd like to speak?
At this time, are there any members who are virtually present who would like to provide public comment? And I'll provide a few more seconds for any interested members to raise their hand. Okay, Chair, at this time, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, not seeing or hearing any, anybody wishing to provide public comment. That brings us to agenda item number 11. Closed session.
Again, just a reminder for the folks that are attending here physically and virtually, we will be going into closed session. Depending if members of the public would like to stay, we could relocate to another room. Or if everyone else is leaving, we'll just remain here. For the folks that are virtually present, you may remain in the webinar. The audio and the video will be turned off. And we will return to report on all the closed session actions. And at this time, I will pause the recording.
We're back in open session. The announcement of closed session is that the board was updated on the cases pending. And that will be sitting in the future. And now that takes us to agenda item 13, which is adjournment. I have a motion.
So moved.
Second.
And good night, everyone, and thank you so much.